And we're back in the car on a Friday, like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Friday morning here with me in New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. So I'm wearing my Teddy KGB shirt, which I guess is somewhat fitting because the movie I'm going to focus on today was released in the same year, although it isn't Rounders that I'm going to discuss as much as I love that movie. But the film I want to discuss is one which celebrated its the 27th anniversary of its wide theatrical release, at least in the United States, Peter Weir's The Truman Show. I was going to talk about it yesterday, but I was just so exhausted, not sleeping great. It was 92 degrees, people on Long Island going crazy like we've never had hot weather before. But there's never a bad time to talk about a great movie or a great character like Teddy KGB. But The Truman Show is a strange unicorn, not just film, but from a conceptual standpoint. What I mean specifically is, it is a movie that was much buzzed about for months prior to its release, and we'll get to that. It is a film that was an enormous box office success. It got rapturous critical praise. The Rotten Tomatoes score was in the 90s, back then, and it's like, I think it's 95, 96, 97% right now. It was nominated for 3 Oscars. I don't remember if it won anything. I don't think it. I know Ed Harris was up for supporting and he didn't win. So with all of this praise, I still feel like the movie is underrated. In part because nobody could have known definitively at the time in which it was released that it was going to get so many details, not only correct, but that it was going to more or less predict the future. Because in the world of The Truman Show, we have essentially, it's Keeping Up with the Kardashians, it's Vanderpump Rules 24/7, but it would just be that Lisa Vanderpump doesn't know that her entire life is inside of a bubble, and they're actually those other people who she thinks are family and friends and enemies. They're just paid actors. And it would be if Kim Kardashian was in a bubble and her life was not her life, that she basically was some kind of a Blade Runner, an android, a replicant. And all of a sudden, holy shit, what is real? Nothing is real. Well, that's the world of The Truman Show. And when I say how the film had been buzzed about for quite some time, 1997 to me was a really good year for movies. The only year in the decade of the 90s, which I have gone on record and I will go down on this hill, the 90s are the greatest decade that Hollywood ever had. The quality of big studio productions, of the modest budget, independent with studio headings such as The English Patient, Hollywood never did it better than they did it in the 90s. 97, though, was a big year for Hollywood. That was the year of Titanic. But there were also major studio pieces such as L.A. Confidential, such as Contact, movies of that ilk. The Rainmaker, of course, Coppola. The Truman Show was wrapped. The film was completed and could have opened in the Christmas season, quote unquote, Thanksgiving, so whatever, doesn't really matter what you call it, of 1997. The studio decided not to do that. Maybe they felt it was inevitable that Titanic was going to win Oscars and they had ideas. This is maybe the best movie that the studio's made in a decade. We don't know what goes on, but the film was completed. And it is exceedingly rare to have a movie completed, a clear Oscar contender, and you just don't release it. Because there are cases, and I can think of 2 in particular, where you have a big movie that should have come out the prior year and didn't, but it was because there were issues with the production company. And the 2 examples of that are in 1990, Jonathan Demme's Silence of the Lambs was ready and wrapped. You don't get a movie of that quality being released on Valentine's Day. And then there's the joke of why would you release a film like Silence of the Lambs on Valentine's Day? But Silence of the Lambs was supposed to be a 1990 release. It would have shot it out at the next year's Oscars with Goodfellas, and that pun intended, it would have shot it out with Goodfellas and Dances with Wolves. And I believe if that had happened, Goodfellas wins Best Picture and Martin Scorsese wins Best Director. But that doesn't really matter now. That's just my, sort of subjective opinion. But there were issues with Orion Pictures, and the film it was not released when it was ready. It came out the next year, and then it swept all the Oscars. So how much Hollywood history changes if Silence of the Lambs opens to qualify for those Oscars? And then move forward, Fargo probably should have been released at the end of 1995, and I think that it wins Best Picture. As much as I love Braveheart, Fargo does even better if it's at the 96 Oscars than the 97. But that was also an issue where there was the distributor and there were questions. They weren't able to release it in 1995. Well, with the Truman Show, that's not what happened. The studio, presumably, and nowadays we would know exactly what everybody was thinking because it would be all over social media. They were thinking, we'll make the biggest box office if we are not staring down the barrel of Titanic and some of the other big movies. And there was some talk that Robin Williams and Flubber was going to be a huge hit. That was not a very good movie. I mean, it could have been. You had Good Will Hunting, of course. And as I say, The Rainmaker, which was a significant hit. There were just a lot of big movies in that part of real estate that year. So I don't remember the name of the author. And the internet we know existed, but it was nothing like it is now in 1997. It just wasn't. Someone from Esquire magazine, he may have been a culture critic, saw The Truman Show. It was not an early cut. This was not a preview screening. This was the finished film. So the studio wasn't releasing it, but they wanted people to see it. They were that confident that Weir had knocked it out of the park. There'll be Oscar buzz for Big Jim, all that sort of stuff. Maybe Laura Linney for supporting Ed Harris. So a number of major players in Hollywood saw The Truman Show sometime November, December of 1997. Every person who saw it came away with some variation of, wow, holy shit, and why isn't this movie being released in 1997? Well, they saw a soft release slot in June of 98 and figured our primary function, we don't know with the Oscar nominations. Again, this is all supposition, but it's logical based on what we know of Hollywood. So the film was held back and did not open until June 5th, 1998. So I read about it, and this is something that we see now occasionally where you have a big film like the Stephen King, Mike Flanagan collaboration, Life of Chuck. People have been talking about Life of Chuck for months, and film fans who haven't had the opportunity to see it, when is it coming out? Blair Witch Project going berserk at the Sundance Film Festival in January of 1999. It's not coming out till July. Go fuck yourself. But that's how it goes now, and that's how it went then. But I just knew Peter Weir never missed. And The Truman Show was going to be as advertised. It wasn't going to be one of those where there's enormous advance buzz and the film kind of comes out and flops, because a later Jim Carrey film, which I like, The Majestic, was a film that was huge advance buzz, Oscar this, Oscar that, came out. It just didn't make any impression. But the way to describe how great The Truman Show was then is now. I have not seen that many movies in theaters more than once. The aforementioned LA Confidential I saw twice, but not in the same time frame. I watched it when it opened in September of 97. I saw it with my father. And then when it was re-released, the Oscars, after it was nominated for all the Oscars, they put it back in theaters. This was something, some of you know, that used to be done. It's how Shawshank Redemption began to find its audience after bombing. After it was nominated for 7 Oscars, they put it back in theaters, and people were like, holy shit, what's this movie? How did we miss it the first time around? So I saw LA Confidential in theaters twice. I saw Lethal Weapon 2 in theaters twice. I saw The Truman Show 3 times during its opening weekend. I could not believe how good the movie was. It's almost like by the 3rd time, I still wasn't believing. There's no way it's this good, this rewatchable, because it's not a happy story. For all the bright colors, for all of the lighthearted moments with Jim Carrey, occasionally doing Jim Carrey things, and Peter Weir talked about how much great stuff Jim came up with on the spot. He couldn't put in the film because this isn't a comedy. This is not Ace Ventura. This is not Liar Liar, which was the movie that Jim had shot just before beginning work on The Truman Show. This isn't even The Cable Guy. This is the brightest, seemingly most lighthearted dystopian nightmare ever made. And it's part of why this film is so great, because it has the veneer of civility. It has the presentation of something that's just going to make us smile, make us feel good. But you start to analyze what goes on in this film. It is as vicious, brutal, and emotionally violent as a Martin Scorsese picture. As he always says, never calls it on in the credits a Martin Scorsese film. It's always a Martin Scorsese picture. You know, there's a version of The Matrix in which Martin Scorsese makes this movie instead of Kundun. Now, he wasn't offered it, but this has the viciousness of a Scorsese film. You really start thinking about what is done, what has been done to Truman Burbank. It's horrifying. It's worse the more you think about it. And yet, the emotional impact, and there are certain moments in films, and I'm sorry I get emotional with these things, but there are certain moments in movies, and I'm going to stay away from spoilers. I'm going to throw something at you that's only a spoiler if you've seen the film. There are certain times in movies where a moment takes place that, for me, there is a transcendence where I almost can't believe how good this is, how much this hits, how brilliant writer, director, actor, film, whatever it is, how amazing this is. One of those moments is in Pulp Fiction, when we finally realize Jules Winfield and Vincent Vega, they're in the same coffee shop that got boosted more than 2 hours ago at the beginning of the movie. Tim Roth and Amanda Plummer are about to get a lot more than they bargained for, thinking nobody in here is going to be armed. There's not going to be any dangerous people in here. Oops. Spoiler alert. This maybe wasn't the best coffee shop to boost at this particular time. Well, there's a moment in the Truman Show where, after all the horrifying bullshit that Truman Burbank has absorbed, all of the nonstop gaslighting from every single person he meets in the Truman Show, he has a moment where he's had it up to here with their shit, let's put it that way. And he gives a kind of classic Jim Carrey from that era smile and a chuckle. And he bows. And I get the chills just thinking about that bow, what it represents. And if you want to go into the Alfred Hitchcock Rear Window perspective, the idea of looking, the idea of people on stage giving a performance, the idea of people in a movie giving a performance, there is so much extra context. When Jim Carrey bows, he's presumably bowing to his fellow castmates. He's bowing to everyone watching him on television, but it's a movie within a movie. It's a world within a TV show, and we're watching a movie. He's bowing to us also. There is such genius in that moment. And the way Jim handles that, I don't know how many takes it took to get it just right. Maybe he got it on the first shot. Maybe it took 30 takes for the timing to be as impeccable as it is. But that's a top 10, maybe top 5 greatest moments that I've ever seen in a movie. Pulp Fiction is one of them. And I'll tell you another one. The moment in the movie Aliens, doesn't matter whether it's James Cameron's director's cut or the theatrical, this moment is the same. The moment in the movie Aliens where Ripley gets into the power loader, and she now, at least in theory, has the strength because she's in a power loader that's capable, it's probably stronger pound for pound than that alien creature. She now seems to have the advantage. But as she looks to press her advantage, the alien is so vicious, diabolical, and is such a perfect killing instrument that the mouth within the mouth is this close to killing Ripley. That moment of endless horror is also one of those incredible moments where you say, how is this even possible? How can there be this much? Well, The Truman Show is a film of almost endless invention and genius, where every scene could be a self-contained short film. Every scene has a point to make, sometimes about Truman, sometimes about the world inside of The Truman Show, and oftentimes about the world outside The Truman Show. And the world that we live in 2025, where, hey, every one of us can be a star of our own story, as I'm right now talking to you. We all have the capacity. But at least we're aware of who we are and where we are, and we have a high degree of probability. I'm not going to say 100%, but we have a high degree of confidence and probability that the people in our lives really are. You know, we're not replicants. This isn't the world of Blade Runner, which has a similar, again, you start running it through your head. You understand why if you call Truman Show sci-fi, you're not really wrong. This is dystopian shit. But in Blade Runner, you have some people who are not people. They think they're people, but they have been implanted with, let's say, 25 years worth of memories that belong to someone else. Truman has a life that is all fiction. There is nothing real except for him, because he doesn't know that he is taking part in fiction. Now, as I say, The Truman Show was an enormous box office hit, made 270 million, gross. And it was a reasonable budget, but it was not like the craziest budget. And if the studio was worried about, staring down the barrel of Titanic, as I said, and trying to shoot it out at the box office, 98 was not really a year that The Truman Show was going to win Best Picture. Now, if I'm asked the question, do I think that The Truman Show was the best film of its year? Absolutely, I do. And there was a lot of films from 98 that I really like. Of course, Saving Private Ryan. I don't have it in my Spielberg top 5. Incredibly powerful. And truth be told, I was so distraught and unsettled by the opening Omaha Beach sequence, I almost left the theater. And I had seen some really horrendous stuff in film school. I sat through Pier Paolo Pasolini's Salo. That's the most traumatizing movie I've ever seen. But the immediacy of Saving Private Ryan, it got under my skin. And I'm glad to say I didn't leave, but I almost left. I really like Shakespeare in Love, but Truman Show was a better movie than both of them. You want to have Spielberg keep his Best Director Oscar for Private Ryan? I can't quibble with it. But Peter Weir should have won the award there, and Truman Show is the best film of 1998. I love Life is Beautiful. I know that was controversial. The Roberto Benigni. I love him. He's great. Terrific film. I know it somewhat softens the horrors of things that went on in Europe in World War II. I understand that. I read all the arguments, and even Spielberg talked about it, and he was very careful. See, that's the thing, whether it's current era Spielberg or back then, he was never looking to make enemies. He was very calibrated in his speech. And what he said was, you read between the lines, I don't think that he appreciated the film. He liked it, he thought it was entertaining, but he didn't like the way that it was made. But he said, any movie which shines a light on this era is okay by me. It's what he left out that you're kind of left with. But it just didn't do as well in award season as it should have. And Ed Harris, if you ask me, his performance is good, but he's better in Apollo 13, another Best Supporting Actor nomination. He very easily could have won as Gene Kranz, the mission control director in Apollo 13. He's so good in that film. And also, a little trivia, Ed Harris was a last-minute replacement. It was supposed to be Dennis Hopper. And there's a famous moment at an award show where Jim Carrey gave a Lifetime Achievement Award. I think it was in 96, but it was right before he and Dennis Hopper were going to go to work on The Truman Show. And so there was some talk. The guys had become friends, and Jim Carrey announces Dennis Hopper this Lifetime Achievement Award. And when Dennis Hopper comes up on stage, Jim Carrey goes, "Don't you fucking look at me," which is Hopper's famous line from Blue Velvet. And I had temporarily forgotten, and I didn't understand what Carrey was, of course they bleeped it out, what he was talking about. But Dennis Hopper doubled over laughing. I mean, I thought he was gonna get a hernia from laughing so hard. And then Jim Carrey repeated a few more times, "Don't you fucking look at me." But supposedly, Dennis Hopper walked off the set after one day. He and Peter Weir clashed. I just think it was an approach thing, a presentation thing. And I think that from what I understand, Hopper was too broad in how he wanted to play the character. And Weir was telling him to rein it in, I think. And Hopper just said, you know what, fuck this. And I don't even know if he got paid because he only worked one day and he left of his own volition. I don't think Weir fired him. I think Hopper just said, this part isn't for me, I'm sorry, or some variation on that. This doesn't happen that often in a business, especially a guy, I mean, Hopper had some personal problems, but he was great. He's so good in Speed. He's even good in Waterworld. He kind of steals the movie from the nominal star, Kevin Costner. And Blue Velvet, top 5 best supporting performances I've ever seen as Frank Booth. Just absolutely incredible, a resourceful, good filmmaker too. You know, he's Easy Rider. He was in Colors. He directed a film with Sean Penn in the late 1980s. You know, very solid film. Robert Duvall. But The Truman Show is so profound. You can just watch this film. It's difficult to watch it completely passively and not get caught up in what Truman is caught up in. But not everybody is going to have it hit the same way. Not everyone is going to be rattled and shaken to the core as I was on first viewing. You don't expect a film with 90s era Jim Carrey. I mean, he's only 4 years, less than 4 if it had come out in 97, 4 years past his big, you know, superstar moment in Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, The Mask, and Dumb and Dumber at the end of the year. Imagine having 3 enormous comedy blockbusters in 1 year. That's how Jim Carrey became Jim Carrey. He was known to people like me before that, movies such as Once Bitten. He worked with Clint in Deadpool. He's very good, but that's not a comedic role. But this is not that Jim Carrey. And I guess some audiences, the expectations where this is going to be a light and funny kind of serio comedy, like a comedy drama maybe, and it ended up being the sort of film that you can't really shake. And it's a great performance by Jim. There was a lot of unhappiness in Hollywood when he wasn't nominated for Best Actor, but he wasn't going to win that year. Benigni ended up winning. But you had big hitters. You had Tom Hanks for Saving Private Ryan, and he didn't win. Yeah, I think Benigni won Best Actor, and he's, truth be told, he's really good. And Roberto Benigni is just, he's such a great comic performer. You know, even with the language barrier, he was a riot at those Oscars, dancing on the chairs, and he even danced above Spielberg, and you felt Spielberg's like, you know what, this guy is fucking great. I love this guy. The way Spielberg was laughing at, you know, as all of it was going on. I did feel bad that Jim didn't get a nomination, but I believe that he was robbed the next year when he didn't get nominated for Milos Forman, another all-time filmmaker, one of the greats who unfortunately passed, for Man on the Moon. But Carrey had Truman Show and Man on the Moon back-to-back. He won back-to-back Golden Globe Awards for actor and wasn't nominated for Oscar. I think it was less surprising that he wasn't nominated for his turn as Andy Kaufman, Tony Clifton in Man on the Moon, because that film got much more wide range of critical reception. If you go on Rotten Tomatoes, it's fresh, but it's like 75%. I think Man on the Moon is the best movie. Yeah, I'm going to go down on that hill. It's the best movie Milos ever made. Better than Amadeus, better than One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Well, maybe I'm stretching it. It's better to me. And I love Amadeus, either cut. But there is just something, the alchemy of Man on the Moon is similar to the alchemy of The Truman Show, where the whole is greater than the parts. And that's another movie where there is a moment to me of transcendence. Won't spoil it, but there's a moment towards the end of the movie where Paul Giamatti is in a location that he can't be in unless something has happened that has been prophesized for the entire film. That is another one of my top 10 favorite individual moments in any movie. So Big Jim has 2 of them. He has his moment of the bow in The Truman Show, and then he has a moment on stage towards the end of Milos Forman's Man on the Moon. I don't know right now. I know that Truman Show was streaming with Paramount Plus free. It's been free with Prime, occasionally on Netflix. I think it might be on Tubi, you know, in terms of free apps, but you could probably find it for free somewhere. Maybe it's on Hoopla or Canopy or Pluto, where you don't have to pay $3 or $5 to see it. If you're a movie fan, even if you're under 30, even if you're under 20, this is an essential film. And if somebody says, give me 3 Jim Carrey movies, what are the most important films to see to understand why this guy became such a big deal? I'll go first Ace Ventura, how he just took a really shitty script and just talk about spinning gold from straw. He did it there. So there's that movie. And then I would say The Truman Show and Man on the Moon. But The Truman Show, released 27 years ago yesterday, directed by Peter Weir and starring an extraordinary Jim Carrey with good support from Laura Linney and Ed Harris. This has been episode 554 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all so much for spending some of your Friday morning here with me in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then, peace.